Hello, everyone, and welcome to Yardstick Management's virtual DEI in Action series. My name is Selma Shilbaya, and I serve as the Chief Communications Officer at Yardstick Management, where I have the honor to oversee all the internal and external communication strategy alignment, marketing, public relations, branding, and project management solutions for our global clients. I've spent most of my career in journalism and higher education, with 7 years at CNN covering international and domestic breaking news as a producer, assignment editor, and writer, and in the recent years in communications and public relations. Simultaneously, I have taught numerous communication courses at a variety of universities, including Georgia State, Burnell, and Clayton State University. And today, I couldn't have asked to be at a much more suitable space to extend my experience and amplify America's leading Black-owned management consulting firm, Yardstick Management. And I'm delighted to be your MC for this episode of DEI in Action, honoring Asian American and Pacific Islander leaders in the workforce. Our founder and managing partner, Ebby Parsons, has built a legacy of the management consulting firm, serving and impacting some of the biggest name brands in the world, such as Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, LinkedIn, Prudential, Medtronic, and many more. Yardstick has partnered with over 100 companies, government agencies, and higher education institutions in the US, Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Our work has impacted 2.6 million people plus globally and has been recognized nationally for its innovation by Inc. magazine as an honoree of Best in Business this past year. And this year, Yardstick has launched an innovative initiative with our inaugural Leadership Institute. The Institute was held in historic St. Simons Island, Georgia, this past January. And our theme was leadership and vulnerability, which captured critical conversations that garnered both attendees and speakers from across industries nationwide, including key decision makers from Netflix, CNN, Riot Games, and many others. If you've missed this, don't worry. Our second institute is back by popular demand, and it's taking place on July 27th through the 29th, presented to you by Indeed, and sponsored by Amazon, MailChimp, Reddit, Jobcase, and Lemon Perfect. The focus this summer is on accelerating change to achieve transformative success. Early registration is now open. Seats are limited, so be sure to register by visiting our website. Now, I want to welcome all of our viewers, including our clients and partners from all across the nation during the celebratory Asian American Pacific Islander Month. Thank you for joining us. While waiting on everyone to join, I want to invite you to introduce yourself via Zoom chat. First, please make sure you change your to be directed to everyone. And please tell us your name, where you're Zooming from, and anything else you want to share relevant to today's conversation. We also encourage you to engage with us on social media throughout the program today via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. You can tag us and also use hashtag YSM Virtual Series and hashtag DEI in Action. We also want to hear from you. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A section where you can ask our panelists questions throughout the program. We're also going to engage with you with several trivia questions. For your convenience and reference, we're including a link in today's program here in the chat, which you should have also received upon registration. The schedule, topic of discussion, and full speaker bios are all included. Now, let's go ahead and get started. We have prepared a stellar lineup of prominent change makers who are going to provide unique insights in how they continue making a mark on our culture, society, and politics, and learn about the challenges they faced in doing so. These speakers have walked the walk, embedding DEI in the DNA of every organization they've touched, and we are incredibly excited and delighted to have them join us today. But before we invite them to the virtual stage, we want to hear from you first with our first trivia question. It's going to pop up on your screen. Feel free to make a selection. The question is, why does AAPI Heritage Month fall in the month of May? Let's see how much you know about this one. Is it the first, the second, the third, the fourth? It could be multiple. I'll give you a little hint. There are multiple reasons of why it's been selected to be in May. All right. Look at that. Look at that. We got a 100% that it's the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in May. That is one of the answers. The other one is that the first Japanese immigrants arrived to the US in May. So thank you for participating. Asian Americans are well represented in the workforce, as you may already know, yet underrepresented in the corridors of corporate power. They hit what the author Jane Hume dubbed as a bamboo ceiling, just as women are said to be blocked by a glass one. The myth that Asian Americans are the model minorities, hardworking people who don't really need much help, has blunted their progress. But now, amid companies' promises to increase diversity, members of this community are feeling a bit frustrated by the lack of advancement and employees seeming indifference to their situation. At Yardstick Management, we understand to our core the lack of diversity and representation in leadership roles. And we have made it our mission to level the playing field for marginalized communities in these spaces. As a matter of fact, our executive search practice is focused on finding Black and Brown talent and Asians and all minority populations to successfully place leaders across industries and many organizations, including Reddit and Coursera. Leading our executive search practice and team is Johnny Park, our global head of executive search and HR, who is joining us today to share his journey in leading from Asia to America with influences and challenges in between. Johnny is a seasoned HR practitioner with over 15 years of international experience in policies and strategies, including workforce management consultancy and people development. Prior to joining Yardstick, Johnny was based in Vietnam, living and working in Southeast Asia and specializing in HR for emerging markets, international conglomerates, and large companies. Some of his employees included Fortune 500 and global organizations. Help me welcome to the virtual stage, Johnny Park, my colleague, my esteemed colleague. Hello, Johnny.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining this morning to talk about our practice. And I know that you will delight us with just all the massive amount of information regarding your experience and work in this space. But before we dig into that, I want to talk about your personal journey. Talk to us about the work that you have done in the past overseas and here in the US that got you to where you are today with Yardstick.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been thinking about this the last few days and weeks, and really, each of us have our own unique experiences that allowed us to get to where we are today. And I've been very fortunate to be able to not only work overseas and to be a part of that immersive culture and understanding different thinkings and different behaviors and different ways that people operate versus, my experiences here in the U.S. And focusing on HR and focusing on recruitment and focusing on everything in between, my learning has been people just want to be recognized. People want to be heard and people want to be appreciated. And for me, it's been such a great opportunity to be a part of the Yardstick management team is because we are partnering with such incredible organizations who are taking and focusing D&I progressive work and making that a part of really their groundwork and their foundation. And I'm just really pleased to be a part of that. And so I encourage all those, whether you are new in your career or expert levels in your career, to keep supporting one another and to be able to build that network.
John, you bring with you really an incredible experience in the global space, which ties into a lot of diversity naturally, right? And then you brought that into Yardstick. What we do here is so focused on diversity and placements of those individuals in leadership positions. How has your work, I guess, in Vietnam shaped or influenced what you do here at Yardstick? And then we'll go from that and tap into your own personal background and culture influences.
Yeah, for me, working in Southeast Asia, people work everywhere, people work hard. But in order to survive and really do well in that corporate space or in any of that space, in my experience in Vietnam in particular, is you just have to always be hustling and grinding and really just trying to stay ahead of everybody, whether it's 2 steps ahead or 12 steps ahead. It's really just being able to get that experience and exposure. And for me, my success is always based on an ecosystem. And it's always important for me to be able to leverage not only my network, but also to be able to get really wonderful people who will coach and inspire and guide and get me into those areas where I can continue to excel and achieve. And I would say the same thing here since I've been working, I'm repatriated back to the US the last couple of years, is being able to continue and build that network and be able to continue to rely on individuals. Many of are on the Zoom call today, which is to be able to network and coach and guide, and as well as, pay that forward to others as well.
Jenny, tell us a bit about your own cultural background. Where are you? Because you have such a unique story. You got to tell us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my background is I think unique to me, but I think there's, as we expand and get to know others, I think there's a lot of similarities, even in the last couple days and weeks, getting to know the rest of the panel as well. So my father is Korean, hence the last name Park. My mother is Vietnamese. It was a treat to live in Vietnam and experience some of those things. I was born in the Middle East in Tehran, Iran. So my parents had met prior to the war, and they wanted to continue and explore different markets. As a result, the job of my dad ended up landing in Tehran. And we migrated to the US when I was about 5 or 6. And as a result, my parents were immigrants. Their English wasn't that good. And there's all these experiences that I imagine a lot of people have with having immigrant parents. And for me, that experience has been really enlightening, especially, being a father myself now, and being able to translate what that means, not only to my children, but also reflecting that on what that means to my parents and how difficult that they had it. And so for me, moments like these where we're able to celebrate different ethnicities and to celebrate different heritages, I mean, it's really, really special and unique. And so, I'm just, again, very thrilled to be a part of it.
Thank you, Johnny. I love that. I love your story because it's quite unique. Like, I love the Tehran part as well. I mean, being a person who comes from also Middle Eastern backgrounds, I could totally relate, as well as being a refugee. I think overall that experience is very relatable. Not a refugee, but an immigrant, sorry, is very relatable. So thank you for sharing that. So as we tie this into how that has influenced the specific work that you do, working in recruiting, and working across cultures, diversity, especially here at Yardstick, being able to find talent that is 100% Black, Brown, Asian, minority, marginalized in general, women, all of that. What is a piece of advice, I guess, that you would give to others in the same field in order to create more diversity within the hiring pipeline? Of course, this is the work we do. We get hired to do it for companies, but what would you tell those who are making the decision in hiring?
I would say culture fit is incredibly important. Not only organizations look for those that can fit within the dynamics of the key performance measurements, but also to be able to fit within the team and organization. So from the employer side, I would definitely recommend making sure that when you're looking for individuals, of course, they have to meet the job descriptions criteria and so forth, but also making sure that they're a cultural fit. I think from the employer side, from the employee side, or if you're a potential employee, it's also making sure that that fit also is in alignment. I think it's really important to be able to understand and come to work really bringing your true self, being able to be genuine and being able to add your unique experiences as well as your unique leadership or communication styles to be able to bring that to the team and be a value add. And so for me, as that happens, it's continuously building that network. Oftentimes when we are looking for jobs or when we're called by folks like me, we may be passive or we may be looking for roles very specific, unique to us. but at the very end, it's really about network and connecting with others. And so I encourage people to, always branch out, get to know others, and really, whether it's in your field or outside of your field, branch that out, because as your career journey progresses, there might be different parts of those individuals that can either help, or you can help those. And so for me, networking has always been that fundamental part of my career. And so I encourage all those to be able to hone in on your strengths, hone in on your uniqueness, and help bring that to the organization or to your communities.
I couldn't agree with you more. I know we're always here, at least at Yardstick, and our founder in particular. For those of you who know Ebby, you know how much of a connector and a networker, but mostly a relationship builder. I think a lot of what you do, Johnny, you and your team, is continuously nurturing and building those relationships to ensure that you find the right fits and places for them across organizations, and vice versa, also with the organizations, the relationships with them. So I'm going to shift gears a bit because I'm curious to know a little bit more about Johnny too. So who or what, maybe a moment in your history, in your past, in your journey, has made an impact or has been an inspiration to you while growing up? This could be when you were much younger, or maybe in your early career, and why?
Yeah, my initial thought always leads to the strong women in my life. I have an incredible mom, and I have two wonderful sisters who are just really impactful in their own unique ways. And as I thought about, some of those moments that have impacted my life, I remember initially moving to Vietnam, and I had bosses in Singapore. And one particular boss, we were chatting, and they were saying, yeah, I mean, I like the US, but it wasn't really my cup of tea. And, many, many years ago, I was thinking, well, Anna, that's interesting. And people like to go to America, or maybe they want to, have their career there, or what have you. And what I realized, or what was shared with me, was, when he came over here, and I had other conversations likewise, is that when they came here, because of their accents or because of whatever,
Mhm.
they were just always marginalized, even further marginalized. And even though they were, the top of their careers, going out to the grocery stores or going out to whatever, there was just that stigma. And for me, coming back here, working and repatriating back in the US, I can't help but think of that, and I can't help but relate that with experiences that either my parents faced, or my older siblings faced, and many of us have faced because of those stigmas. And for me, the thing that I try to do is just try to recognize it, acknowledge it, try to break those barriers, but really also try to help others, whether they're up and coming or whether they're established, just to be able to really be that support structure. So for me, that's been one of the biggest impact that I've realized, and I continue to try to pay that forward.
It takes a real leader to see that through, I think, to be able to carry that weight and that burden of the stigma. And again, I could relate with you in different ways. But at the same token, looking past that, it's tough. We have to acknowledge it definitely is tough. But I'm so glad to know that someone like you is in a leadership position to be able to break through that and allow for opportunities for others to do the same. And so this is going to take me into my last question with you about leadership, right? What would you say are the most critical characteristics and traits of an effective leader?
That is an excellent question. And I think that evolves depending on where people are in their careers, whether you're leading a big team or a small team, or leading yourselves. I think that really depends. But my response is unique in the sense that just being genuine. I think when you bring your true self, or you do your best to bring your true self to the work, and sometimes that's not that easy. Sometimes there's
Mhm.
elements or factors that allows us to put on our shield or put on a facade, but all the more reason to find organizations, at least the best of our abilities, for us to be able to have that fit and alignment. But again, going back to my thought, is just to be genuine and to be able to bring that to the workplace, to your either teams or to, others, just to be that genuine self. And then the other thing goes back to the Yardstick Institute, the wonderful program that we had back in January, and also the one that we're expecting to have in July, which is the theme of being vulnerable. I think oftentimes, particularly maybe in Southeast Asia at least, there's a stigma also to be very strong, to be very powerful, to be very bold. But there's a sense of vulnerability that comes. And that's something that I've really realized being a part of Yardstick the last year, is just to be able to know that when leaders bring that vulnerability, it's okay. And there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of humility that comes with that. And because of that, it's this synergistic way of being able to move forward. It's not just me being independent, but it's being interdependent with others. It's being able to collaborate and to be able to come up with better solutions and ideas or projects or whatever because of that interconnectedness.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love that, being genuine and being vulnerable, because in those two things, you're also creating space for others to do the same. And that makes a great leader. Johnny, thank you for sharing your time and your insight with us today. It's always a pleasure speaking with you in this unique environment too. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selma.
All right. So we now want to hear back from you all again with our second trivia question before we go into our panel conversation. It's going to pop up on your screen. And the question is, Asian Americans represent 5.6% of the US population, 12% of the professional workforce. What percent of corporate executives are Asian? We're getting the results coming in. All right. Okay. It looks like about 50% of you said 1%, which is correct, and 50 said 4%, which both of them anyways are quite minimal. This is where we're at in terms of executives that are Asian Americans. In 1978, Congress passed a resolution creating Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. That expanded as we know it today to the observance of the month of May in 1992, which we learned earlier timed to coincide with two important milestones in Asian Pacific American history. One, the arrival of the first Japanese immigrants in the US, and the second, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10th, 1869. Now, it is really worth noting that the majority of the workers who laid the tracks were Chinese immigrants. The 20 million plus Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have always played an integral role in building our nation, and they do so across industries and levels. And while only 1% of that population is represented at the executive level, many more continue to make strides in passing that bamboo ceiling. Today, we want to continue to honor a few more leaders in the space who have made profound contributions in the workforce. Joining us is a panel of trailblazers in their respected industries here to speak to us about their passion, their work of passion. Joining us first is Kim Bowie, Vice President of CNN Special Projects, the team behind acclaimed human interest stories on the network's television and digital platforms. Among the long franchises Barnett oversees, you'll notice, is the Impact Your World and 2021 Gold Anthem award-winning Champions for Change. Both tap the power of storytelling to empower and inspire CNN's audience. Barnett is a founding member of the Turner Asia Business Resource Group and a mentor with the Emmerman Angels. She also served as a board president of Refugee Family Services, now New American Pathways, as well as leadership roles with the Atlanta chapter of the Asian American Journalists Association. In 2015, Barnett was one of the inaugural CNN Diversity Ovation Award honorees, recognized for her commitment to diversity and inclusion. Up next is Rina Patel. She is the leader of the PLBY Group, Playboy International Business. She is the president there, with a focus on business operations, excellence, partner integration, optimization, and overall international strategic planning. Dr. Patel is responsible for Playboy's brand monetization across licensing, digital commerce and services, and third-party retail. Previously, Dr. Patel served as vice president licensing at IGT, and brings with her experience from roles at Merrill Lynch Investment Managers, Scotiabank, and Sun Life Investments. Joining us next is John C. Yang. He is the president and executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. He leads the organization's efforts to fight for civil rights and empower Asian Americans to create a more just America for all through public policy, advocacy, education, and litigation. His extensive legal background has enabled the organization to address systematic policies, programs, and legislative attempts to discriminate against and marginalized Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and other minority communities. Mr. Yang served in the Obama administration as senior advisor for trade and strategic initiatives at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And joining us also is Christy Sithaphone. She is the Global Director, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Omnicom Public Relations Group and Omnicom Brand Consulting Group. She gets to advance systematic equity across organizations in this company's initiative. Previously, Christy worked at CNN Digital as a manager on the Strategic Initiatives team. And before CNN, she served as the Director of Programs and Communications at Leadership Atlanta, one of the nation's most outstanding community leadership programs. Please help me welcome Kim, Rina, John, and Christy to the virtual stage. Hello, everybody. All right, so we're gonna get started. We've got a team of incredible individuals, and I'm gonna take turns and go around and really have you introduce your culture background and how it's influenced your path in your career. We'll start with you, Kim.
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, Selma, thank you for the invitation and an opportunity to really learn from this panel and certainly from our attendees through questions. So my culture and background, I was born here in the United States, first generation Vietnamese American, and how it's really influenced my career path. I think more recently, I recognize how family on both sides have really shown me, not necessarily kind of talking about it day to day, but has shown me how you can lead in different ways and how there are different ways you can contribute to your community through your work and other ways. So I feel like it was really important to have people within my own family that I could see who were Vietnamese American, who are Asian American, to help guide that. I would say journalism, where I ultimately landed, and actually knew from a very early age that I wanted to pursue this career. I would consider more non-traditional in terms of a career among an Asian American family, but I appreciate my parents' support in that, and very quickly learned after graduating from college that it was a bit of a family calling, because my paternal grandparents were both journalists in Vietnam and really challenged political institutions and thinking really in Vietnam, which was very brave of them.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that little tidbit. How cool is that? You're continuing the legacy here. I love it. Christy.
Yeah, thank you, Selma, and thank you, Kim. So my parents are refugees from Laos, and so they came here shortly after the Vietnam War when they were sponsored into this country, and their journey alone has really, kept me inspired and humbled. And even though from day to day, as I've changed different positions and roles, they don't always understand, because like Kim, I'm in a very atypical position for an Asian American. The story of my parents' journey to the United States is what keeps me grounded. And, in my career, it's been very non-linear. So I worked in consulting before. I've been a nonprofit. I've been in executive search at one point. I also did that, and now working in global DEI. It's all led me here. And what keeps me here is because through that, it's been, understanding the journey that my parents have. And I think John mentioned it earlier, the continued feeling of being marginalized. That has really shaped my experience and who I am now. And I'm a huge empath. And so anytime I feel things a lot. And so I always think about, like, what did my parents have to go through? What did my family go through? I'm also first generation college student. I went to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And after that, my sister and 3 other cousins went there. So we almost started like a legacy with that. But everything in my background has shaped who I am today. And I always think about, the amount of sacrifice. And I think you hear that a lot when you're especially in our AAPI community, the word sacrifice. And that, again, always keeps me grounded.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing that, Christy. Congratulations to you for being first generation college graduate too. John.
Sure, and hello to everyone. I'm delighted to be here. As some of you know, I am the executive director of an Asian American civil rights organization. And certainly for me, who I am and where I came from is foundational to why I am doing what I do today. So I am an immigrant, as is about 60% of our American population. About 90% of our Asian American population are either immigrants or children of immigrants. So, if we were to take a poll of this panel, I'm sure we would come up with very similar statistics. But not only am I an immigrant, but I actually was an undocumented immigrant. Of about 9 years old until 17 years old, my family lived, quote unquote, under the shadows, or what some might call an illegal alien, right? And certainly that time, and looking at how my parents navigated that, the fear that they had at times, their inability or unwillingness to work with law enforcement if our store got robbed, or to challenge a distributor if our contract gotten taken advantage of, certainly led in the first instance for me to go into law school. But then, especially in the environment of the last several years, where we have seen so much xenophobia, and obviously more recently, so much anti-Asian hate, I did feel like it was my calling, that there was this moment that I needed to dive head first into this world of nonprofit civil rights, really defending our community and advancing our community's interests. And so I feel privileged and honored to be able to do that.
John, thank you for doing the hard work and sharing that story with us. This is tough work and important work. So thank you so much for joining us too to share more about it. Rina, your turn.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Rina Patel. My mother immigrated from India to Canada. My father immigrated as an Indian living in South Africa, from South Africa to Canada. And I immigrated from Canada to America. So kind of on the same path as my parents, moving, across countries and across worlds to end up in a new place. Grew up with a lot of the same expectations I think Asian families grow up with, is that they wanted me to be a doctor. They wanted me to be an engineer. That's what, get married, have some kids while you're doing all of that. And I think in some ways exploring those norms, which I did. I had a pre-medical degree. I met about 100 guys that I thought I would marry. Created a desire for me to explore what else there could be and how I could manifest that future in a way that I could bridge those expectations into paths that were a better fit for who I was as an individual. And kind of in the same way they did, right? They moved across the world to kind of find their path and break the norms that they grew up with as well. So I think it pushed me to find a future, looking at how they found their future that better fit who I was, but still tied to my roots. So I still studied my medical sciences, but I used that science to how I operate as a business leader. I still married, but I have a same-sex partner, and I have 2 beautiful children now that my parents still dote on as their grandchildren, and my extended family around the Indian universe still treat as their Indian grandchildren. And I think it's shown me that success can manifest in our culture in different ways without needing to lose your roots. And I think everyone on this call has kind of, really shown that you can be non-traditional in that sort of Asian way in terms of your career path and your outcome, but still really have a strong tie to your roots and how your family showed their courage and sort of their breaking of their tradition to get you where you are today. So.
I absolutely love it. I love that. And I like the way that you've actually talked about their journeys and yours finding themselves in your own way. I mean, I could relate. I think all of us on this call and maybe others who are listening can relate to that. Thank you for putting it in perspective. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. All right. I'm curious to hear, you all are making your own marks in your respective industries, and they're all quite unique industries, actually, also specifically for AAPIs. What do you think in general has been the most impactful mark that AAPIs have left in our culture, our American culture, our politics, our business, and society? And it could be one of all the ones above or all of them if you want to tackle it. Who's ready to answer? I don't want to. Rina, you're still unmuted if you want to take that.
Sure. I think that, when people often look at the Asian community, they look at traits that I think I even look at as innovation, as tenacity, as grit, as hard work. But I think that when you look at Asian leaders across various spectrums, their ability to manifest empathy and to build and bring community along with them is something that is a mark that they've always left and continue to leave. And it carries lessons, I think, for other communities. Like if you just look in politics, the way the Indian community in India, the Indian community, and I'm speaking about the South Indian community, but if you could apply it to any sort of Asian community, the way the community rallies together, and the way that that business leaders can bridge that community, I think, and build that community, I think is really remarkable. But I also think there's an element of empathy that, the way we're raised, the way that we raise our children, the way that we look. I think it was Christy that talked about being an empath. I think that's something that is a part of all of us as Asians. And I think that is also an area that we leave a mark. And I'm not being very specific, but I'm talking more about the traits that we have that leave marks in the community.
And I think dovetailing off of what Rina's just said, we're seeing it now, how the Asian community is galvanizing around combating anti-Asian hate. What John, Christy, and Rina are all working towards, just seeing the allyship in response to all forms of discrimination, not just anti-Asian hate. I think it goes back to what Rina is saying with the empathy and how we as a community lean on each other, but also reach out to other communities. I know from a journalism perspective, I've seen a shift in coverage. I think just more integration of diverse perspectives, and a greater effort to reflect the stories of people's lived experiences. So that's sort of externally what we're seeing with journalism. And I think internally within various journalism organizations, there's a greater effort for a more inclusive newsroom. And there's still work to be done, but I am seeing people within my own organization, myself, it takes courage to speak up, right? So I'm seeing people from diverse backgrounds really bring up maybe topics or suggestions that were previously difficult to talk about in these editorial meetings. And I think it's really encouraging.
So my world is more in the world of politics, if you will, in small p, being here in DC and working on advocacy. So let me think about it from the representation standpoint with respect to politics. And I'll use two specific examples. One is Norm Minetta, who many of you probably know his name. He was the Secretary of Commerce for Bill Clinton, and then the Secretary of Transportation for George W. Bush, many other acolytes, former person that was incarcerated during World War II as a child. After 9/11, he was in charge of basically bringing all of the planes down safely into the airports. In his first meeting with President Bush, after all of that, after they briefed President Bush on what was happening, et cetera, he asked for a private audience with President Bush just for 1 minute. And in that private audience, he later told a number of us, he emphasized to President Bush, I've been through this before, and I am worried that what we saw during the Japanese American incarceration will happen again to the Muslim, South Asian, Middle Eastern community. So I would ask you to make sure to make some public remarks about how we are not targeting the Memza community, but this is something that we are just focused on terrorism. And that, among other things, led President Bush to, make a trip to a mosque and make those types of statements. Second example I would use is with respect to the Muslim ban. When the Muslim ban happened, a number of organizations litigated, and 3 lawsuits, one in New York, one in Maryland, one in Hawaii. 2 of those lawsuits, there was an Asian American judge who presided over those lawsuits. And I did not know how those judges would rule. They were people I actually had the fortune of knowing. But just knowing that there was an Asian American judge gave me great comfort, because we knew that this was someone that understood the immigrant experience, understand that foreigner experience, and would be able to sort of represent. And so I think what I want to make sure my message is this is, from whatever place where you sit, where you have a voice, exercise that voice and have that courage to exercise that voice, because that's needed.
Oh, John, thank you so much for educating us on this. This was like really fascinating to hear about that and the impact behind the scenes that really come to fruition that impact everybody else as an outcome. I'm going to take us this, and I knew this was going to go fast. We're at 12:42, so I want to make sure that we go into the next question. We've talked a bit about some of the, I guess, the stigmas and also the stereotypes in your journeys that you've had to break through or change or figure out. Walk us through the challenges that are specifically related to building your career that may have been related to you coming from an AAPI background. Christy?
Yeah, so I mentioned, this is a great question. I mentioned earlier, I've never, there's like this meme out there that it's like, you'll be disowned by Asian family if you're like not a doctor, not an engineer, but like it just was hilarious to me, because I feel like I would be disowned in a sense, right? Because I'm not in that way. And for me, I think I have transitioned so much like in industries, but the hard part was actually trying to translate some of those skills. And so those are the kind of things that you aren't taught in college. And then of course, my parents being refugees to this country, I had to figure it all out myself. Like when you go to college, you're thinking, I wish I was taught how to save more. When my parents came here, they literally just had to figure it out. And I had to figure it out too, being the first person to go to college and graduate and like become an adult. So, trying to figure out the salary piece, like negotiating your salary and asking for more because you might not feel like you're worthy. And I had to learn that later. Like now I know, okay, I need to ask for whatever they offer me, offer 10% more. Go after that job, even if you think you're not qualified. And I think that's been tough for me. I mean, before I actually got to CNN Digital and was trying to leave nonprofit, I struggled. I applied for 2 years and it was hard to figure out, like, how do I take what I know I'm good at and sell myself on that. And I have really strong soft skills. I can talk to anybody, but it was like trying to sell like some of the hard skills, which is, the technical qualifications, was really tough. And I think that, when you're talking about talent advocacy and recruitment, that conversation needs to be had more, and even more so for our community in particular, because we're not good at selling ourselves. And I think my path, and I was in sales for a while too, that personally helped me, but I wonder if, we focus more on that could help our community more. So those are some of the challenges that I faced of trying to transition and sell myself in different ways.
Fair enough. And I think in some way, shape, or form, it ties into what John was saying, speaking up in general. So not just speaking up on behalf of others and advocating for what's going on, but speaking up on behalf of yourself. And I would have to agree. Who else would like to share? Kim?
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to so much of what Christy just shared. You know, I think as I think about my career path, primarily at CNN, I'm celebrating 27 years coming up. So I've worked in different departments and have done different things in those 27 years. So just recognizing the norms in different work situations and really figuring out how do I authentically participate when there are certain norms? And if those norms clearly are not serving the majority or many of the people, how do I be a change agent, right? Without jeopardizing my career or feeling somehow that it's going to affect me negatively. And I think actually being within one company has helped me navigate that and gain confidence and find allies and people to help advocate and jump in and reinforce certain things that I may say in a meeting. So I feel like that's probably the biggest challenge and probably will be going forward. But finding what Johnny said earlier in the session during his sharing, it's being confident in your authenticity and then really finding a way to share it with people so that it helps more than just you, so that it can be an example to others.
I love that, absolutely. Rina, would you like to add anything for John before we go into the next question? Any challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the challenges are similar to a lot of challenges many minority workers in general face, and that's that we struggle to find representation, community, and understanding in the workforce. I think I was raised in a way, like many of us, to tolerate. You know, we learn to tolerate certain things. I have learned, don't rock the boat, keep your head down, just do good work. But the world has changed, and you know, keeping our head down, hiding, pretending to be invisible is stifling. It could be traumatic. It could be an inhibitor to good work. It could be an inhibitor to long-term success. You might not find the good workers because they're hiding in a corner. And so I think representation really matters, and that sort of finding your allies, finding your voice, how to sort of bring that voice up. Like, you know, I think for myself as well, being at a company for so many years has helped me find those allies in that community and be more confident. But in the early years, it was very much that fear of like, oh, if I rock the boat, what will happen? You know, that sort of, even as a woman, like the idea that you have to just keep your head down. I think it was the most challenging.
Sure what's going on, but we're getting a little bit of some technical. You're rocking the boat on this screen, Rina.
Yeah.
So you're doing great. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for bringing that up, because I do think the representation, especially at the leadership level, is the most challenging in general, because obviously when we see that representation exist at that level, then we feel like we can get to that level, right? We can do more, be more. We have an ally there. And so it makes a huge difference. And so going from challenges, I want to tap into a different question, the opposite end of that, right? Which of your accomplishments, and I know you all are accomplished, this is not just me asking you to like toot your own horn, although we will be tooting for you, but I really am curious, which of your accomplishments that make you the proudest, and the proudest in terms of like as a contributor in your space. It could be community related, it could be work related. And if you could tie it into AAPI and the impact that may have left for other individuals in that space. John, we'll start with you.
Sure, and I'll admit I'm at an advantage in some ways because I am at an organization that's our focus with respect to the Asian American community. I think there's one at a global level and one at a micro level. The global level is one of the things that we did during this moment that we've been facing of anti-Asian hate was pretty quickly on, we saw this coming. And so we created what was called the Bystander Intervention Program. We did this in conjunction with an organization called Right to Be. And this basically gives people techniques. If they see someone being bullied, they see someone having racial epithets hurled at them, they are equipped with things to do. You know, we're not asking people to be superheroes, but often in those times, there are small things that can be done that minimizes the trauma for the victim. And so over these past 2 years, we've trained over 120,000 people. And I get reports all the time about individuals that come up to my staff members or even to me and say, hey, I used this in such and such situation. And just to think that our training was able to minimize trauma for these individuals is just certainly so meaningful to me. At a micro level, there are individual cases where we represent individuals. And in one particular case, right now, there's a lot of racial profiling of Chinese American scientists because of our tensions with the Chinese government. And so one particular case, and a case involving a doctor named Dr. An-Ming Hu in Tennessee, we were finally able to get the Department of Justice to drop their appeal against him. And just to see, not his face, but his wife and his child's face when they got the news, it was just wonderful. It's just wonderful.
Amazing, John. We're going to have to tap into you for the training, all right, for Yardstick. So watch out now. I can sense maybe a possible partnership there, which would be great for our clients. All right, who wants to share next? Proudest moment. Kim.
You know, I think generally speaking, with what we've all been through with the pandemic over the last 3 years, I'm really proud of how our team pivoted. You know, the core work that we do brings us into communities. It takes us out in the field, and not being able to do that initially when the pandemic broke, but still having stories to tell, an impact to make. I'm really proud of how we were able to pivot and very quickly find different ways to bring the stories of various communities during a really challenging time around the world. I think specific to the Asian American and just Asian population is getting stories out about mental health. It's a difficult and sometimes taboo topic among Asians and Asian Americans, and Julia Chan on my team pulled together. I mean, it's Asian Pacific Heritage Month, but it's also Mental Health Month as well. So these are resources and interviews with professionals that understand the culture and understand the stigma, and providing our community with that resource is something I'm really proud of. And for all different communities, you know, we really expanded that offering to our audience so that it was targeted to the specific, whether it's a Black community. And I think there's nuance in that can be really difficult. But when you have a diverse staff and you have an organization that is truly trying to embrace that, then you can get at that nuance and really provide, hopefully, a service that is helpful. So those are just two areas that come to mind.
Keep rocking, Kim. Those are incredible stories, and I see that John already put that in the chat. The wonderful reporting on anti-Asian hate. I have to agree with that. It's been really fascinating to watch. We're a little short on time, so I want to make sure that we get this last question in, and I want to give each one of you a minute or so to respond to it, because I think this is a really important question for all of the decision makers that are joining us today in this virtual space. What piece of advice, in about a minute, okay, would you give these decision makers, maybe even in your respective fields or across fields and industries, right, to create a truly inclusive workforce? that allows for the thriving of AAPIs. Rina or Christy, one of you may start. Go for it,
I can
Christy.
jump in here, and it's a little bit related to what I was going to respond to in the last question. But for me, I think that when you're building teams or building programs or events, the way I look at things is I'm always assessing any gaps. So if you're trying to be truly inclusive, think about whose voice is not being represented here. I'm the president of NAP Atlanta, which is the National Association of Asian American Professionals. And I can truly say we're finally Pan-Asian as a board. We have South Asian, we have Southeast Asian, we have East Asian. Even in our membership, we actually have a few Pacific Islanders. We all say AAPI, but do you actually have someone PI?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to include NH, well, do you actually have someone Native Hawaiian? So ask those questions. What are we missing here? Who's not at the table? And do we just need to, build a new table? I don't know. But don't be afraid to even challenge, your own thoughts and perspectives. And I think that's how you continue to be better and truly be more inclusive.
Very good advice. Rina.
I would say mine are probably 3 quick things. Don't be invisible. Share your own unique experiences, but also be an active listener to the experience of others. And truly commit to DEI in your organization and the implementation of it. So don't just talk about it and then don't actually see it through, but the implementation of it is important. And I still see too many organizations that talk about it. Yeah, it's part of our mission or whatever, but they're not taking the steps to actually implement those practices. Because without that, everything else kind of falls apart. So.
I think that's so important, Rina, that it's the commitment to inclusion for the long haul. I know that with George Floyd and anti-Asian hate, there are these moments, but if as a leader, you can keep reminding people on a day-to-day and speak up so much of what everyone has said, and show and act as we are committed, and we're committed for the long haul. And I think reminding people to speak up for the value and not against someone, right? We had this wonderful speaker, John Amaechi, who said that you want to be clear on what you stand for, but when you do speak up, the way you galvanize people is to not speak against others, but really speak for the value. And that has really stuck with me.
I love that. John.
The last thing I would add, I completely agree with everyone, especially on active listening and really true commitment implementation, would be data and metrics, right? For many organizations, this goes to what Rina is saying about, are they really in this for the long haul? And part of how you make sure you're in it for the long haul is you are gathering data about sort of where there is under-inclusiveness, what places are underrepresented. The fact you look at our panel, the Asian American community is very diverse. So making sure that it includes all of that diversity. And then what are your benchmarks that you are offering? And are you achieving those benchmarks? Because that's how you tell whether you're committed and you're actually making progress.
I absolutely love that. It's a quite comprehensive list of advice, team. Take it, walk away with it. Thank you for your time, your energy, your contribution. Thanks, Kim, Christy, Rina, and John for joining us today. All right. This wraps up this episode of Honoring Asian American and Pacific Islander Leaders in the Workforce, brought to you by Yardstick Management's DI in Action series. I want to thank our panelists and thank all of you for joining us. Please go to yardstickmanagement.com, subscribe for news, and follow us on social media for continuous updates on future events, including Pride Month next month. Let us know what you think by writing to us directly. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, be well and stay in touch. Thank you.